His face was a mask of pure, unfiltered rage, the kind of rage that contorts a person's features until they are almost unrecognizable. His skin was mottled, a blotchy red and white, and a vein throbbed violently in his temple. It looked like a fat purple worm trying to escape his skull. "You can't do this!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "This is my house. I own this house." My mother stood just behind him, a statue of crumbling arrogance. Her perfectly coiffed hair seemed to wilt in the afternoon sun. Her hand, usually so steady when holding a glass of Chardonnay, trembled as she clutched at his arm. Her face was as white as a freshly bleached sheet. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a small, sharp, quiet thing, a curve of my lips that held the weight of months of pain, humiliation, and cold, calculated patience. It was the smile of a chess player who had just said, "Checkmate." But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand that smile, to truly appreciate the beautiful, catastrophic implosion of my parents' world on that perfectly manicured lawn, you have to go back. You have to go back to the beginning. It's funny. The things you remember. I'm sitting here now, in my own apartment, a place that is truly and completely mine. The air smells of lavender and old books, not my mother's cloying potpourri and my father's expensive but soulless cologne. A soft rain is tapping against the window pane. It's peaceful. And as I trace the rim of my coffee mug, my mind drifts back to a letter I found tucked away in a box of old keepsakes. It's a note from my grandmother, written to me on my 18th birthday. A birthday that, in hindsight, was the beginning of the end. Or maybe the end of the beginning. Let me start there. Growing up, I was the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never caused any trouble. My entire existence seemed to be tailored around maintaining the placid, perfect surface of our family life. Our house was a showpiece, a large, immaculately kept colonial in a neighborhood where appearances were everything. My mother, Eleanor, was the queen of her social circle, a woman whose self-worth was directly tied to the gleam of her hardwood floors and the envy of her friends. My father, Richard, was a man who worshipped at the altar of control, his control over his business, his finances, his family, and most of all, over me. I was a project, a testament to their superior parenting. I got perfect grades. I played the piano, not because I loved it, but because it looked good on college applications. I was quiet, I was studious, I was obedient. I was, in essence, a reflection of their own perceived perfection. They didn't see me. They saw a resume. They saw a bragging right. From the moment I could handle a dustcloth, I was expected to contribute to the running of the household. Not in the way normal kids are, with a few chores for allowance. No, I was the assistant house manager. I did the deep cleaning my mother couldn't be bothered with. I managed the grocery lists. When I was old enough to get a part-time job in high school, my earnings were expected to go into a household account. They said it was to teach me financial responsibility. What a joke. It was to subsidize their lifestyle. The fancy dinners, the new car my father leased every 2 years, my mother's endless shopping trips for clothes she wore once. I was their secret, convenient little income stream. I loved them, of course. Or, I think I did. I loved the idea of them. I craved their approval with an ache so profound it felt like a physical part of me. A single, well-done Clara from my father could make me feel like I was floating for a week. A rare, genuine smile from my mother felt like winning a prize, so I kept my head down and did what I was told. I convinced myself this was normal. This was what it meant to be part of a family. You give, you support, you sacrifice. The naivety is almost painful to look back on now. I was a lamb, happily trotting alongside the wolves, believing they were my shepherds. The inciting incident, the moment the pristine facade of our family finally cracked, came on a Tuesday, a perfectly ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday in October. I was in my second year of university studying architecture. It was the one thing I had fought for, the one piece of my life that felt truly my own. My father had wanted me to go into finance naturally, but I had dug my heels in, and with the surprising silent backing of my grandmother, I had won. I had a late class that day, a studio session that ran until 7 in the evening. I remember walking home, the air crisp with the smell of autumn leaves. I was tired but happy. I'd had a breakthrough on my design project. I was thinking about the hot shower I was going to take, the leftover pasta I would heat up for dinner. I walked up the stone pathway to our front door, the same pathway I had walked up thousands of times before. I dug in my bag for my keys, my fingers closing around the familiar cold metal. I pushed the key into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned. I tried again, jiggling it. Nothing. It felt solid. Blocked. Strange. Maybe the lock was jammed. I tried my other key, the one for the deadbolt. Same result. It wouldn't even go in all the way. A cold knot of confusion began to form in my stomach. I peered at the lock set. It was different. The familiar brass handle and keyhole I had known my whole life were gone. In their place was a new, shiny silver set, sleek and modern and utterly alien. They had changed the locks. My first thought wasn't anger. It was a dizzying, disorienting confusion. Why? Why would they change the locks? And why wouldn't they tell me? Maybe there was a break-in. Maybe they lost their keys and had to call a locksmith in a panic. Yes, that had to be it. I pulled out my phone to call my mother. Her line went straight to voicemail. I tried my father. Same thing. The knot in my stomach tightened, turning from confusion to a cold, sharp dread, and then I saw it. Taped to the center of the door, right at eye level, was a white envelope. My name, Clara, was written on it in my mother's elegant, looping script. My hands were shaking as I pulled the envelope from the door. The tape peeled off with a small, ripping sound that seemed deafeningly loud in the quiet evening. I opened the flap and pulled out a single sheet of my mother's expensive, cream-colored stationery. The note was short, brutally so. "Clara," it read, "your father and I have decided it's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet. Your belongings have been packed and are in storage. The details for the unit are below. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." Below her signature were the address of a storage facility and a unit number. I read it once, then twice. The words swam in front of my eyes, refusing to make sense. Stand on my own 2 feet? Future endeavors? It sounded like a termination letter, like I was an employee being laid off, not a daughter being thrown out of her home. The cold dread in my stomach exploded into a full-body shock. My legs felt weak. I had to lean against the brick exterior of the house to keep from falling over. The world tilted on its axis. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of cruel, elaborate joke. I frantically redialed my mother's number. Voicemail. My father. Voicemail. I sent them a flurry of texts. "What is this? Call me now. This isn't funny." Delivered. Not read. I sank down onto the cold stone steps of the porch. The letter crinkled in my fist. The house I had grown up in, the house I had cleaned and cared for, the house where all my memories lived, was suddenly a fortress, and I was locked on the outside. All my things, my clothes, my books, my laptop with my school projects on it, my childhood teddy bear, were gone, packed away in a sterile metal box somewhere. An hour passed, or maybe it was 2. The sky darkened from bruised purple to inky black. The porch light on a timer flicked on, bathing me in a sterile, mocking glow. Finally, my phone buzzed. It was my father. What the hell is going on? I practically screamed into the phone, my voice raw with tears I hadn't even realized I was crying. His voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. "Clara, your mother's note was perfectly clear. It's time for you to be an adult." "An adult? You changed the locks. You threw me out without any warning." "We didn't throw you out," he said, the lie so blatant it stole my breath. We are encouraging your independence. You're 20 years old. You have a job. You can support yourself. My part-time job at the campus library paid just enough for my textbooks and a bit of spending money. It was nowhere near enough to live on. He knew that. Of course he knew that. Where am I supposed to go? I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a hollow, cavernous despair. All my things are gone. My laptop, my schoolwork. That was irresponsible of you not to back up your files, he said, the casual cruelty of it like a slap in the face. As for where you go, that's for you to figure out. That's what being an adult is, solving your own problems. I could hear my mother's faint voice in the background. Is she crying, Richard? Tell her not to be so dramatic. Dramatic. I was sitting on the cold concrete, locked out of my own home, and I was being dramatic. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice barely audible. There was a pause. And then, my father delivered the line that would fuel the fire of my revenge for months to come. Honestly, Clara, he said with a sigh, as if I were a tedious inconvenience, the house is just too big for your mother and me. We're thinking of selling, downsizing, and frankly, having you here was becoming an encumbrance. Encumbrance. Not a daughter, not family. An encumbrance. A burden to be shed. The line went dead. He had hung up. I sat there in the dark for another long while, the single word echoing in my head. Encumbrance. 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 The shock had burned away, leaving behind a pain so sharp and deep it felt like a physical wound. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a lesson in independence. This was a betrayal, a cold, calculated, and complete severing of ties. They had used me for as long as I was useful, and now that they wanted to cash in on the house, I was simply disposable. My tears finally stopped. The shivering subsided. And in the empty, frozen space where my love and loyalty for my parents had once lived, something new and hard began to form. It was cold and sharp and clear. It was resolve. I stood up, my legs stiff. I smoothed out the crumpled letter and put it carefully in my pocket. I looked at the house one last time. It no longer looked like my home. It looked like a tomb. I had one place to go. One person who had always seen me, not the projection my parents wanted me to be. I called my grandmother. My grandmother, Evelyn, lived about 40 minutes away in a small, cozy cottage filled with books, plants, and the smell of freshly baked bread. She was the polar opposite of my parents. Where they were cold and rigid, she was warm and soft. Where they valued appearances, she valued character. She was a retired lawyer, sharp as a tack even in her late 70s, with a no-nonsense attitude that I had always admired. When I called her, my voice still trembling, and explained the situation, she didn't gasp or exclaim. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Then she said two words that were more comforting than any platitude could have been. "Come home." When I arrived on her doorstep, shivering and lost, she just wrapped me in her arms. She didn't press for details. She just led me inside, sat me down in her worn, comfortable armchair, and put a steaming mug of tea in my hands. "They finally did it then," she said quietly, her voice laced with a grim sort of resignation. "The selfish, arrogant fools." I looked at her confused. "You're not surprised?" She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Clara, my dear, I have known your father his entire life. I am his mother. I am never surprised by the depths of his selfishness or by your mother's spineless complicity. I'm just sorry. I'm so sorry they aimed it at you." We sat in silence for a while, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall the only sound. I told her everything, the changed locks, the note, the phone call, the word encumbrance. Her face grew harder and colder with every word I spoke. By the time I was finished, her gentle grandmotherly expression was gone, replaced by the sharp, assessing gaze of the lawyer she used to be. "All right," she said, her voice firm. "Crying time is over. Now we plan." "Plan?" I asked, my voice thick. "Plan for what? I have nothing. They have everything." She smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, my dear girl," she said, leaning forward, "that's where you are wrong. They think they have everything, but you have the house." I stared at her, utterly bewildered. "What are you talking about? They're selling the house. That's why they kicked me out." "They can't sell it," she said, her eyes glinting, "because they don't own it. Not really." She stood up and went to an old roll-top desk in the corner of the room. She unlocked a drawer with a small silver key and pulled out a thick leather-bound portfolio. She placed it on the coffee table in front of me with a soft thud. "Your grandfather and I were not blind," she began, her voice taking on a formal, measured tone. "We saw the kind of man your father was becoming. We saw how your mother enabled him. We worried about you. We worried they would use you up and discard you when it suited them." She tapped the portfolio. "So we took precautions. Your grandfather was a wise man. He believed in protecting his own." My hands trembled as I opened the portfolio. Inside were pages and pages of dense legal documents, trusts, deeds, official-looking papers with seals and signatures. "When you were born," my grandmother explained, "we bought that house. It was our gift to your parents to raise their family in. But we didn't put it in their names. We put it into an irrevocable trust. On your 18th birthday, as per the terms of the trust your grandfather and I created, you, Clara, became the sole beneficiary. Your parents were designated as trustees with the right to live in the house, provided they maintained it and acted in the best interest of the beneficiary. You." The words hit me like a physical force. I looked down at the documents, my eyes scanning the legalese until I found the key phrases. Sole beneficiary, Clara Vance. Trustees, Richard Vance, Eleanor Vance. It was true. The house. My house. They have a legal fiduciary duty to protect the primary asset of the trust, which is the house, my grandmother continued, her voice like ice. They are not permitted to sell it, borrow against it, or do anything that would diminish its value, and they most certainly are not permitted to bar the sole beneficiary from accessing her own property. A dizzying, electrifying wave of something power, maybe, surged through me. The despair I had been drowning in was replaced by a white-hot, furious energy. By changing those locks, by denying you entry, they have breached their duties as trustees, she said. By attempting to sell the property, they are committing fraud. "So I can go back there?" I asked, my voice shaking with this new, incredible revelation. "I can just go back?" "You could," she said, holding up a hand. "We could call my lawyer, Bill, right now. He could have them served with papers by morning. They'd be out on their ears by the end of the week." The thought was intoxicating. The image of their shocked faces, the humiliation. I wanted it. I wanted it badly. "But," my grandmother said, her eyes narrowing, "is that enough? They humiliated you. They threw you out like trash. A quick, clean, legal victory. It doesn't seem to fit the crime, does it?" I looked at her, understanding dawning. She wasn't just talking about legal justice. She was talking about retribution. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "I'm suggesting patience," she said. "Your father is arrogant. He believes he's untouchable. Right now, he thinks he's won. He and your mother are probably celebrating, toasting to their newfound freedom and the pile of money they think they're about to get." She was right. I could picture it perfectly, the smug satisfaction on their faces. "Let them think that," she continued, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Let them proceed with the sale. Let them hire a realtor. Let them list the house. Let them spend the money they think they're going to get. Let them dig their own graves deeper and deeper. Every step they take is another crime, another breach of their duty. We will document everything, every phone call, every email, every text." It was a terrifying, brilliant, and utterly ruthless plan. It wasn't just about getting my house back, it was about letting them orchestrate their own complete and total destruction. You need to play the part, my grandmother warned. You are the broken, defeated daughter. You are struggling. You are lost. You cannot let them suspect for a single second that you have this. She tapped the portfolio again. Can you do that? I thought about the word encumbrance. I thought about my mother's voice in the background, telling me not to be dramatic. I thought about the cold, hard click of the phone as my father hung up on me. A cold, hard certainty settled over me. Yes, I said, my voice steady for the first time that night. I can do that. The next day, my grandmother's lawyer, Bill, a kindly man with sharp eyes and a shark's grin, came to the cottage. He went over the trust documents with me, explaining every clause in plain English. He confirmed everything my grandmother had said. The house was mine. My parents were in serious legal jeopardy. The moment they signed a listing agreement with a realtor, they committed fraud, he explained, tapping a pen on his notepad. The moment they used any funds tied to the house, say from a home equity line of credit, for personal expenses not related to the upkeep of the property, they committed embezzlement. My father had recently bought a new sports car. My mother had just returned from a spa weekend with her friends. I had a sickening feeling I knew how they had paid for it. Bill laid out the plan. I was to get a new phone and number, which he would have subpoenaed for records later. I was to communicate with my parents only via text or email, creating a perfect paper trail. I was to go to the storage unit, photograph my belongings, and then leave them there as evidence of the illegal eviction. And most importantly, he said, looking me in the eye, you live your life. Go to school. See your friends. Let your grandmother take care of you. We play the long game. We wait for them to schedule the open house. The open house. The public spectacle, the moment of maximum humiliation. It was perfect. So began the period of my endurance. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I moved into my grandmother's guest room. She helped me buy a new laptop and some clothes to get by. I went to my classes and pretended everything was fine, even though my heart felt like a lead weight in my chest. My parents, as predicted, reveled in their victory. About a week after they kicked me out, my mother sent me a text, not to ask if I was okay, not to see if I needed anything. It was a picture of a real estate listing, our house, my house. The headline read, "Stunning Colonial Gem, Motivated Sellers." Underneath the picture, her text simply said, "Thought you'd like to see. The market is fantastic right now. We're hoping for a quick sale." The cruelty was breathtaking. I wanted to reply with a picture of the trust document. I wanted to tell her I hoped she enjoyed prison food. Instead, I took a deep breath and typed out the reply Bill and I had drafted for just such an occasion. "I don't know why you're sending me this. Please stop." I played the part of the wounded, broken daughter perfectly. When my Aunt Carol, my father's sister, called to lecture me about being an ungrateful child, I didn't argue. I just listened quietly as she told me how disappointed she was, how I had driven my parents to this, how I should be ashamed of myself for not being more independent. "Your father has worked his whole life to provide for you," she'd squawked. "And this is how you repay him? By being a burden?" There was that word again, burden. It seemed to be the family's official term for me now. I just murmured a quiet, "I'm sorry you feel that way," and ended the call. Every word of her tirade was a gift, another piece of evidence of the family's coordinated cruelty. Bill was delighted. My parents escalated their arrogance. They threw a lavish pre-sale party. My mother posted pictures all over social media. Her and my father, champagne glasses raised, smiling triumphantly in the living room I had spent hundreds of hours cleaning. The caption read, "To new beginnings and shedding old weight. #empty nesters, #freedom." I felt a flash of hot rage, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, satisfying calm. Keep smiling, I thought. Keep digging. I focused on my studies with a ferocity I hadn't known I possessed. My design projects became my refuge. I poured all my anger, all my pain, all my focus into my work. My professors noticed I was acing every class. Meanwhile, in the background, Bill was a silent, efficient machine. He gathered the listing agreement from the realty company through a private investigator. He subpoenaed my parents' bank records, which showed them drawing heavily from a home equity line of credit and spending it on luxuries. They were funding their new life with a loan against a house they didn't own. The weeks turned into 2 months. The for sale sign on the front lawn was a constant mocking presence in my mind. According to the realtor's website, an open house was scheduled for the first Sunday in December. The trap was set. All we had to do was wait for the mice to walk into it. The morning of the open house was bright and cold. I woke up feeling a strange sense of calm. The anger and hurt that had been my constant companions for months had receded, leaving behind a steely, quiet purpose. I dressed carefully, not in anything flashy, but in a simple, well-tailored black dress. I wanted to look serious. I wanted to look like I meant business. My grandmother hugged me tightly before I left. "Remember who you are, Clara," she whispered. "You are not their victim. You are your grandfather's legacy. You are my girl. Now go and claim what is yours." I met Bill at a coffee shop a few blocks from the house. With him were 2 other people, a burly, uniformed police officer there for a civil standby, and a quiet, unassuming man holding a large toolbox, the locksmith. "Ready?" Bill asked, handing me a copy of the finalized legal portfolio. It was heavy in my hands, the weight of my future. "Ready," I said. We walked to the house. The street was lined with cars. The open house was clearly well attended. My mother's social circle had turned out in force. As we approached, I could see my father on the front lawn, holding court. He was laughing, clapping a neighbor on the back, looking for all the world like the king of his castle. My mother was standing on the porch, greeting people as they arrived, her smile wide and brittle. She was wearing a new, ridiculously expensive-looking dress, probably bought with the fraudulent loan. Our arrival caused a ripple in the crowd. People turned to stare. The chatter died down. My father's smile froze when he saw me. It melted away, replaced by a dark scowl. He started walking towards us, his posture aggressive. "What are you doing here, Clara?" he hissed, his voice low and furious. "You are not welcome here. This is a private event." I didn't answer him. I just looked past him, at the house. My house. Bill stepped forward, placing himself between me and my father. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice calm and professional. "My name is Bill Henderson. I am legal counsel for Miss Clara Vance, the sole beneficiary of the trust that owns this property." My father blinked, confused. "What are you talking about? There's no trust. I own this house." "I'm afraid you are mistaken," Bill said pleasantly. He opened the portfolio and handed a document to my father. "This is a copy of the trust agreement established by your parents, Evelyn and George Vance. And this," he handed him another paper, "is a copy of the deed showing the property being held by said trust." My father stared at the papers, his face a comical mask of confusion. This is absurd, some kind of joke." "I assure you, it is no joke," Bill said. My mother had come down from the porch, her face pinched with annoyance. "Richard, what is going on? Who are these people?" "Clara, you are making a scene. You need to leave. Now." I finally met her gaze. I held it. I didn't say a word. I just let her see the cold, hard emptiness where my affection for her used to be. For the first time, she seemed to falter, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. My father, meanwhile, was turning red. He had started to read the document, and the implications were slowly dawning on him. "This is forged," he blustered, waving the paper. "This is fraudulent." "Actually," Bill said, his voice hardening slightly, "the fraud is what you have committed, Mr. Vance, by attempting to sell a property you do not own, and the embezzlement you committed by drawing funds against that property for personal use. That's when his face went from red to a blotchy, mottled white. He knew about the home equity loan. He knew. Furthermore, Bill continued, his voice rising so the surrounding neighbors could hear, by changing the locks and denying Miss Vance, the beneficiary, access to her property, you have egregiously violated your duties as trustees. As such, you are being removed as trustees, effective immediately. He turned to my mother. You as well, Mrs. Vance. My mother looked like she had been slapped. Removed? You can't do that. We can, and we have, Bill said. He gestured to the police officer. This officer is here to ensure a peaceful transition. You are now trespassing on Miss Vance's property. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings, and only your personal belongings, and vacate the premises. And that's when the bellowing started. You can't do this, my father roared, his face contorting in that mask of pure rage. This is my house. I own this house. He lunged towards me, his eyes wild. The police officer stepped in his way, his hand resting calmly on his sidearm. Sir, I suggest you calm down. My father froze, his chest heaving. He looked from the officer to Bill to me. The confidence, the arrogance, the control, it was all gone, replaced by a raw, sputtering panic. The guests who had been watching this drama unfold with rapt attention began to back away, whispering amongst themselves. The realtor came rushing out, his face pale. What's happening? Is there a problem with the title? You could say that, Bill said dryly. The property is not for sale. The realtor looked like he was going to be sick. I turned to the locksmith who had been waiting patiently. Please, I said, my voice clear and steady. Change the locks. He nodded and walked past my sputtering father, past my frozen mother, up the steps to the front door. The sound of his drill starting up was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It was the sound of justice. It was the sound of my life beginning. And that's when I smiled. That small, sharp, quiet smile. The hour that followed was a masterclass in karmic retribution. My father raged, then pleaded, then threatened lawsuits. Bill just stood there, impassive, occasionally pointing out another law my father had broken in his tirade. My mother seemed to have completely shut down. She just stood on the lawn, staring at the house, as if she'd never seen it before, while her friends and neighbors melted away into the afternoon, eager to spread the gossip. My Aunt Carol, who had been inside, came storming out. Clara, what is the meaning of this? How could you do this to your own parents? I just looked at her. They aren't my parents anymore, I said, and the finality in my own voice surprised me. They are just two people who are trespassing on my property. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, before she finally scurried over to my father's side, adding to the Greek chorus of their downfall. They packed a few suitcases in a stunned, clumsy silence, loading them into my mother's car. The new sports car, Bill had informed my father, would likely be seized as an asset purchased with embezzled funds. The look on his face was a portrait of utter devastation. The locksmith finished his work and handed me a new set of keys. They felt solid and real in my hand. I walked up the steps of my porch. I stood at my front door. My father made one last, desperate appeal. Clara, please, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. Don't do this. We're family. I paused with the key in the lock. I turned to look at him, this man who had called me an encumbrance, this man who had thrown me out without a second thought. You taught me what it means to be an adult, I said, my voice cold and even. It means solving your own problems. This is your problem now. Solve it. I turned back to the door, slid the key into the lock, and turned it. It clicked open smoothly. I stepped inside and closed the door on their shocked faces, shutting them out of my house and out of my life, forever. The collapse was swift and total. Just as my grandmother had predicted, the legal fallout was catastrophic for them. Bill filed a civil suit on my behalf for breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, and emotional distress. The evidence was so overwhelming, they didn't even try to fight it. The court ordered them to pay back every cent they had taken from the home equity line, plus punitive damages. The judgment was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The sports car was repossessed. Their bank accounts were frozen. The business deal my father had been banking on, the one he likely needed the house money for, fell through when his potential partners got wind of the fraud investigation. His reputation in the business community was instantly incinerated. No one wanted to deal with a man who would steal from his own daughter. Then came the social ruin, which, for my mother, was a fate worse than death. The story of their public humiliation at the open house spread through their social circle like a wildfire. They were pariahs. The friends who had once flocked to their parties now crossed the street to avoid them. My mother was kicked out of her book club and her charity committee. The shame was absolute. My Aunt Carol tried to rally support for them, but even she fell silent when the details of the financial fraud became public knowledge. Defending them became indefensible. They were forced to declare bankruptcy. They lost everything. The life of appearances they had so carefully constructed was dismantled, brick by brick, until nothing was left. They ended up renting a small, grim apartment in a town an hour away, the kind of place they would have sneered at in their previous life. About 6 months after I closed the door on them, my father showed up at my grandmother's cottage. I was there, having dinner with her. He looked a decade older. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by worn, ill-fitting clothes. His face was gray and haggard. He didn't bluster or rage. He just stood on the doorstep looking pathetic. "Clara," he said, his voice weak, we made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Your mother is a wreck. We have nothing." I stood in the doorway, blocking his path. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hate. I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty space where a father should have been. "You're right," I said. "You did make a mistake. Your mistake was thinking I was weak. Your mistake was underestimating me." "Can't you find it in your heart to forgive us?" he pleaded. "I'm your father." "A father wouldn't call his daughter an encumbrance," I said quietly. "A father wouldn't throw her out on the street. You stopped being my father on that day." He flinched as if I'd struck him. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I just slowly, deliberately closed the door in his face. I heard him stand there for a moment, then the sound of his footsteps retreating down the path. That was the last time I ever saw or spoke to either of them, and now I am back here, in the present. The rain has stopped. The lavender scent from my diffuser fills the room. This apartment is my sanctuary. I didn't keep the house. There were too many ghosts. I had it professionally cleared out, sold my parents' gaudy furniture, and put the house on the market. With Bill's help, I sold it within a month. The proceeds, combined with the damages from the lawsuit, left me with a significant nest egg. Enough to buy this beautiful apartment in the city, pay for the rest of my education, and start my own life completely unburdened. I did go to the storage unit eventually. I threw out most of it. The things they had bought me felt tainted. I kept a few sentimental items from my childhood and the box of keepsakes from my grandmother. The front door to my apartment opens, and my boyfriend, Mark, walks in, shaking rain from his coat. He's an architect, too. We met in a graduate seminar. He's kind and funny and supportive, and he looks at me like I'm the most incredible person in the world. He knows my story, all of it. He thinks my parents are monsters, and my grandmother is a superhero. He's not wrong. "Hey," he says, smiling as he wraps his arms around me from behind, kissing the top of my head. "Smells good in here. What are you thinking about so hard?" I lean back against him, closing my eyes. "Just the past," I say. "Good parts or bad parts?" he asks softly. "The part where it ends," I reply, "and the new part begins." He holds me a little tighter, and I feel a sense of peace so profound it almost brings tears to my eyes. This is what family is supposed to feel like. Safe. Unconditional. I open the old keepsake box and pull out that letter from my grandmother again. the one from my 18th birthday. I had forgotten what it said, but reading it again now, it feels like a prophecy. My dearest Clara, it reads, today you are a woman. The world can be a difficult place, and people, even those who should love you most, can be disappointing. Always remember your own worth. Some people will see your kindness and mistake it for a welcome mat. The trick, my love, is to always remember that you have a steel plate hidden underneath it. Never be afraid to let them feel the steel when they try to stomp on you. I love you. Grandma Evie. I smile, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. She was right. They stomped, and I let them feel the steel, and I have never, ever regretted it.